Yo, Chuck.
What the chuck is up, YouTube? In this video, I'm going to show you Bogo Sort. It might as well be called Bozo Sort because only a total bozo would use this to sort any array of numbers. The only reason you would probably even learn this algorithm is just to be a better programmer. It is not practical in the slightest. So with that said, let's jump into it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just make a function called Bogo Sort. Bogo Sort. It's going to take an array. I'm going to return that array. And then just like we always do, I'm going to console.log out the function with an array called. Let's get an unsorted array. Let's say 1, 5, 3, 2, 4. Something like that. Okay, let's run this code. Run the code. And it returns the algorithm, or the array I should say. Okay, so that's definitely unsorted. So what is the strategy with Bogo Sort? So I want you to imagine one of those Yahtzee cups where you put a dice in and then you shuffle it and then you throw it down and the dice is a random number. That is kind of how Bogo Sort works too. You put in your array of numbers and you're going to shuffle it. And then you're going to shoot out a randomly shuffled array, and you just so happen to hope that it's sorted. So really we can say Bogo Sort is just two helper functions, really. It is a function to shuffle the array, and then a function to check whether that array is shuffled. So I'm going to make a function, or I'm going to make a block of code to test for a array being sorted. So I could say function is sorted, and that is going to take an array, and then we're just going to loop through that array and compare values. So I'll make a for loop. I is less than array.length, increment I. So this is actually pretty simple. I'm just going to compare a value to its value that's previous to it, and if this value right here is less than this value, then I know that the array is not properly sorted. Likewise, if this value is less than this value, I know the array is unsorted. So I can do an if conditional, say if array at index I is less than array at index I minus 1, we know the array is unsorted, return false, because it's not sorted, right? And if that never trips up when we iterate through the entire array, we in fact know the array is sorted, so we can return true. Okay, so we got that code. Perfect. All right. Now, let's test it out. So for Bogo Sort, I'm going to call return is sorted and then pass in my array. It returns false, right? Because it's not sorted. Now let's try sorting it. Let's see what happens. Now we get true. Excellent. Okay. So now that we've established that, I want to make a function that's going to randomly shuffle this array of values. So same thing again. I'm going to make a helper function. I'm going to call it function shuffle. Shuffle. And it's going to take an array, just like we said. I'm going to make some variables here. I'm going to make a variable called random, which is going to be my random index. I'm going to make a variable called temp, which is going to assist me when I need to swap values. And then I'm also going to make a value called index, which I'm going to set to array.length. So whatever the array is, the amount of elements in that array, I want my initial index value to be that. Okay? So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to make a while loop. I'm going to say while index is greater than 0, I would like to decrement index. Okay, so what that's going to look like, let's just console.log this out. Index, let's call shuffle here and see what happens. It's just returning these numbers decremented each iteration. Okay, so I need to make a random index to choose from and to perform my swap, right? Because I want to swap these numbers as I go down. So what I'm going to do is say random equals math dot random times the index, because index is the amount of items. So what this is going to do is it's going to take math.random, which is a number between 0 and 1. It'll never actually be 1. It just returns 0 to some fraction number less than 1. Let's see what that looks like here, actually. I can console log out math.random to prove that is the case. So you can see it's just shooting out fractional values, but it never actually reaches 1. But that's good enough for us in this case because we're going to compare it to index, which at this instance is 5. So what happens when we do math.random times 5? We get a whole number that has a fractional remainder. So if I do this a bunch of times just to illustrate that, notice how the number never reaches 5, which is actually what we want because we actually don't have an index 5 here. We only have up to index 4 because arrays are 0-based. So this, although this array is technically 5 elements or 5 buckets, it starts at index 0, then goes index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4, and then stops. We do not have a index 5. But how do we get rid of this fractional stuff? Because that would really screw up our algorithm. Well, we're just going to use math.floor, which, if you recall, just removes or rounds down that fractional part. So now we're left with whole numbers. And this is a good illustration. You're pretty much going to hit like every indices number you need to hit doing this, right? Okay, so now that I've kind of explained that, let's go back to our random variable. I'm going to floor the result of math.random times index. And then notice I'm decrementing index here. This is important because remember, index right now is at 5. So if I decrement it after performing this calculation, now it's at 4. So I'm going to say temp equals array at index. Okay, so this is array at 4 initially, but remember this index number is always going to be decreasing or decrementing by 1 each iteration of our while loop. And then I'm going to perform the swap. I'm going to say array at index equals array at random, because random, if you recall, is the random index we are creating right here. And now I have to say array at random equals that temp variable. And that will actually shuffle our array. So let's make sure it does shuffle our array. Okay, so I'm going to return the array and we're going to shuffle it. Let's see what happens. That looks good. Notice we're just randomly shuffling our array into just a random sequence of numbers. But I want to show you why it's so important to decrement the index right away. Because if we were to decrement it down here in the while loop, look what happens. You see that undefined value? It's undefined because random sometimes could be set to, index is initially set to 5, right? But we don't have an index 5 in our array, so it's shooting out this undefined value, which is not what we want. So make sure when you're making your shuffle function that you're putting index in the appropriate spot, the decrement of index, okay? So now we've got our shuffle function, we've got our sorted function, and we can actually go back to our Bogo Sort, and we just want to loop through Bogo Sort until it is actually sorted. So I'm going to say while array, or actually while is sorted, pass in the array, and I'm going to say while it's not sorted. So I'm going to use this not operator, and that will basically say keep firing while the array is not sorted. And then in here, I'm going to say array equals array or shuffle, and then pass in the array. Okay, that's pretty much all we got to do for that. You might want to put in an edge case here, if is sorted array. So if it's already sorted, just return the array. Okay, so, and then at the end, we can return our array once it's been sorted. Let's see what happens here. So I'm going to type in Bogo Sort. Hey, it's sorting. That's awesome. So how fast is it sorting, I wonder? Well, let's go up here and make a variable to count how many iterations of sorts this is taking. So I'm going to make a variable called count. I'm initially going to set it to 1 to signify the first iteration of our while loop to shuffle this array until it's sorted. I'm going to console.log this out. And let's see what happens now. Let's see how many iterations it takes to actually sort our array. Oh, we have to increment it. Otherwise, we're just going to print out 1 a bunch of times. But you can see that's a lot of 1s. That means there's a lot of while loops firing there. Let's see what happens now. Wow, look at that. 106 iterations to sort that 5-element array. This time it took 42. 191, you can kind of play around with it and see. It's kind of fun, but you're basically just banking on random numbers with your shuffle array to sort this algorithm or sort this array of numbers, and that is not very performant, obviously. So look at that. Look how bad some of these roles are. Okay, so like you might imagine, this array has terrible time complexity. If you look online, its time complexity is actually O of infinity, which is awful. So I want to increase the amount of numbers in this array to make it even worse, just to prove to you how bad this can get. Okay? So now if I run Bogo Sort, look what happens. 14,000 iterations, 18,000, 10,000. And that might have just crashed my computer. Oh, 162,000. You can just see how bad this algorithm performs. But I think the value in doing something, you might be like, well, this is kind of dumb. I'll almost crash my computer. You might think this is kind of dumb. Why would you learn this? Well, there is inherent value in learning why something is good or bad. And then also, I think the shuffle array, just learning how to do this has some value for sure. The sorted array, I feel like that's kind of obvious. Most beginners anyway, would probably pick up this logic pretty fast. But that is Bogo Sort. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more content, and I will see you in the next one.